Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another live stream here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So this morning, we're very happy to again have with us Shifu Simplicity from Germany, continuing with her presentation of Bodhidharma's teachings on the essentials of Mahayana Chan practice. So as usual, please give your full attention to Shifu and type in any questions you have, and I'll read out any questions you might have for her at the end of the talk. So please, Shifu, whenever you're ready, please go ahead and begin.
Amitofo. Thank you for the invitation. And today we will continue part 2 of the series of talks on the essence of Mahayana practice by Bodhidharma. Last time we heard about the life of Bodhidharma, an ancient Chan master, the Chan master who brought the Chan practice from India to China and is also regarded as the first Chinese Chan patriarch. And Bodhidharma had practiced in China for a couple of years and taught the Chan practice. And there are a couple of texts, and today we will continue with this text. And the full title is Great Master Bodhidharma's Essential Discourse on Entering the Mahayana Path by Principle and by Practice. And so today we want to start talking about the text. Last time we talked about Bodhidharma's life and also the title of this text. So I would like to read it to you, the first paragraph. To enter the great way, there are many paths, but essentially there are of two means, by principle and by practice. Entering the way by principle means to awaken to the truth through the doctrine, with a deep faith that all sentient beings have the same true nature. Obscured by the fleeting dust of delusions, this nature cannot manifest itself. If one can relinquish the false and turn to the true, fix the mind in wall meditation, understand that there are neither self nor others, that mortals and saints are equal and one, abiding in this way without wavering, clinging to not even to the scriptures, then one is implicitly in accord with the principle. Being non-discriminative, still and empty of effort, is to enter by principle. So in this text we have the two main entrances, and to enter the Mahayana way, I want to repeat this here. This teaching here of the way, the Mahayana way, here is not the academic word for the Mahayana in contrast to Theravada or Vajrayana, but here the Mahayana way is a synonym for our Buddha nature. So entering in the Mahayana way means to enter to our, enter means to enlighten to our true nature, to our Buddha nature. And that is here the goal of the practice. And the Mahayana path here is to realize our Buddha nature and to eventually to attain Buddhahood. And Bodhidharma had here 5 chapters where you can enter this Mahayana mind, where you can become enlightened to your own true nature. And there are 2 groups. The first is to enter by principle. That principle is directly the nature of mind, the nature of awareness. And here by principle means you directly understand and realize this nature of awareness. And that is the first paragraph. And the other principle, the entrances by practice, is additional practices, certain attitudes, how we can practice when we have not managed to enter by principle right away in that very moment. So there's the first is the most direct way is to directly enter into the path, just like that. And because that's very abstract, so people try to figure out what that means. So in the first paragraph, Bodhidharma tries to explain and describe how that feels or what that is. And you can compare your own experience to that description. And when you see, oh, it's still too abstract and you cannot grasp it, then maybe you are not prepared enough at this very moment, and you can continue your practice with the other four aspects. So, but it's important to know that both principle and practice lead to eventually to the same goal, lead to the goal for us to realize our nature of awareness or our Buddha nature. Now we come to the first paragraph. Entering the way by principle means to awaken to the truth through the doctrine. Here, the doctrine is the doctrine is the teaching, and so here it means to directly awaken to the truth, and the truth is here what we also call the path, or what we call again we call Buddha nature. That is the absolute truth, the truth of the nature of awareness. And here is it means directly the entrance by principle means to, if you go through the doctrine, that means the teaching and words. You hear the teachings or read the teachings. Let's say you read this text once, and on the first reading you come to a certain sentence and then you get it. And that is entering by principle. So the teaching and words triggers of your inert understanding of your true nature. You understand, you get it right away without thinking. That is a very intuitive, direct experience. And that is not very common. For example, there's the example of the sixth patriarch, who, when he was still a young man and he was a lay person, and he was selling firewood, and someone recited the Dharma Sutra, and he just heard a passage of the Dharma Sutra without being Buddhist before, and he understood right away and realized true emptiness. And that is, and we come to this later, the realization of emptiness is one step on this, on the realization of true nature. So he directly went into this just through listening to one sentence maybe of the Buddha's teaching. And later he went to the fifth patriarch, and then the fifth patriarch saw in an interview that he had already deep wisdom. The fifth patriarch asked him when he arrived, because he was from the south, he was dark in skin color, because the people of the south were a bit more short and dark, and he was living outside gathering firewood. So he was he was a worker basically, and so when he came to the fifth patriarch, he as many people, they come to see the great masters, and they maybe have good wishes, they want to have blessings for their wishes to be fulfilled. And so the fifth patriarch asked him, so what are you wishing for? And he right away, we have to remember that he was not a Buddhist. He said, I want to become a Buddha. I don't strive for anything else. And that is from his one experience of once listening to the Diamond Sutra, that he knew what it's all about is realizing Buddhahood. And the fifth patriarch wanted to test him, and he said, oh, you are a person from the south, and how can you become a Buddha? And he answered very immediately. He said, there's a difference in humans from the north and from the south. There's you as a master and there's me as a worker, but Buddha nature doesn't, there's no difference between south and north and south, or between enlightened or not enlightened. And that was his wisdom that he gained by himself, just by listening to the sutra. And the fifth patriarch, he knew that this was a very special person, that he had great capacities for deeper enlightenment, and he sent him to the kitchen because he didn't want people to catch his attention and make a hype. So later, I cut it short, but it's a very interesting story. Later, a few months later, and the sixth patriarch was still in the kitchen husking rice, and he never went to listen to teachings. He was only working hard. But working, at the same time, he was cultivating his mind. And then the fifth patriarch asked him one night to come to his room, and again, he read the Diamond Sutra, and the patriarch heard one sentence in the Diamond Sutra, and he had the complete breakthrough and understood what is his true nature. And in that moment, he saw that he said, oh, what a wonderful thing. This nature is, or the mind is by nature pure. The mind is by nature unmoving. The mind is by nature empty. And the mind, everyone has this mind, and the mind can bring forth all phenomena. And so he said those 5 sentences, and the fifth patriarch confirmed that he had deeply realized his true nature. And so his story is a very good example of how someone who has sharp roots of wisdom from previous lives and previous practice, who can understand the teaching right away while he is just listening or seeing one sentence. There's other examples. For example, Master Yongjia, he read a text, the Buddhist Sutra, and I think it was the Vimalakirti Sutra. And when he read the sutra in one moment, also he was deeply enlightened to his true nature. And he was later certified by the sixth patriarch. So there are those people with sharp roots who have the capacity to just listen to the Dharma in a very short way without thinking, directly understanding the Dharma. And that is entering the way by principle. And now we continue with the text. With the deep faith that all sentient beings have the same true nature. And that here is the key, is to have the faith or the trust that all sentient beings, including myself, have Buddha nature. There's no one who doesn't have it. I have it, you have it, and also all animals have it. And that is the experience, that when we really trust that there is Buddha nature. Then only with that trust we can actually also realize this. And so that faith in Buddha nature is one of the very important requisites for this method of understanding and realizing the absolute level. If we want to understand our Buddha nature and we don't believe that there's Buddha nature, how can we experience it? Because we block our mind right from the beginning when you say, okay, it doesn't exist, but I want to find it. I want to find out if it exists and I don't trust it, then the mind is blocked and you will not find it. So one very important thing is that you trust in yourself, in your own Buddha nature, and also trust that all beings all have Buddha nature. This Buddha nature is also what we call the absolute truth, or the absolute level. And this Buddha nature, we also call that nature of awareness or true suchness, tathata. That is what the Buddha describes as the absolute level. That is beyond thinking, beyond our thinking mind, and the mind at that moment is clear, has no thoughts, and the mind is empty. But apart from empty, the mind is clear and alert. There is the knowing. There's not nothing. So there is still something, and that is the clarity of mind, the awareness. And that's why we also call it the nature of awareness, because the mind is totally aware, but there's no thoughts, there's no movement in the mind. The mind is still and radiant. And that is this brief description of what is meant by Buddha nature. And everyone has it. Now, it's in the midst of our thoughts, of our feelings, where it's always there. But then we come to the next sentence. Obscured by the fleeting dust of delusions, this nature cannot manifest itself. Here the translation is a little bit free. In the Chinese text, it says this nature cannot manifest because of dust and guests. And that are two metaphors that are not translated in this version here, the dust and the guests. And those is a metaphor coming from the Surangama Sutra. And that is a very important metaphor also for our practice and also for understanding what this is about. We all have Buddha nature. We all have this nature of awareness. This nature is what makes us a sentient being. On the one hand, we are empty. Our nature is empty. Our body and mind are empty. And the Buddha nature is also empty. But apart from emptiness, there's clarity and radiance. There's not nothing. And so this Buddha nature is what we can describe it as the knowing. Right now we are sitting here, we listen to the talk. This knowing, this listening is a function of the Buddha nature. You know the sound, you know the words, you know the meaning. That is Buddha nature that is working. And at the same time, when there's no attachment, so there's no thinking. The Buddha nature is not the thinking mind. The thinking mind is only coming and going. The thoughts are coming and going, arise and cease. There's birth and death of the thoughts. And you may think, oh, a thought lasts for a few seconds. Now I want to have a cup of tea. So I have the thought, I get up, I put on the kettle, I take out the tea bag, and I make myself a cup of tea. And then I drink it, and then the thought of drinking tea is vanished. But that is still very coarse. But in fact, actually, one thought only lasts 1 millisecond or even less than 1 millisecond, and then the next thought comes up. So there's a fluctuation of thoughts, of coming and going, of birth and death. That is our thinking mind. The thinking mind is subject to birth and death. And because we are attached to this thinking mind, we, as this is our true mind, there with this thinking mind, we continue to create birth and death of the thoughts and also birth and death of the physical body in terms of rebirth, because we attach to this mind that is this thinking mind that is subject to birth and death. But true mind is beyond that thinking mind. That is the base, the nature of everything. And we come later in the text, there are more descriptions. And here we all have Buddha nature. And when Buddha was enlightened in at least two sutras, Mahayana sutras, there's a sentence that when Buddha was enlightened in the process of his enlightenment in the night, actually he exclaimed, "Oh, how wonderful! All sentient beings have the same virtue and wisdom as me. But because of wandering thoughts and attachments, this wonderful nature cannot manifest." And this sentence is also very interesting because it tells us first, we all have Buddha nature. All sentient beings, we have those virtues and wisdom that are the function, the quality of our true nature. And Buddha has it, and we have it, and little mosquitoes have it. Everyone has it. But why are we not the same as Buddha? Because our wisdom is obscured by our own wandering thoughts and our attachments. So if we understand this deeply, and it's not only just a theory in words, what that means is that if we want to return to our Buddha nature, there's only one way, and that way is very clear: letting go of all attachments and all wandering thoughts, delusive thoughts. And these delusive thoughts are the thoughts of our thinking mind. Even if we concentrate our mind and we have thoughts about a certain matter, let's say we are thinking about a problem, then that is still the thinking mind that is coming and going, and there's this coming and going, birth and death of the thoughts of the mind. And so that is not yet the Buddha nature. That is not what we call true mind. So when we want to practice and we hear this one sentence of the Buddha, we can see the outline of the practice is all the methods of Buddhism aim at how we can reduce and eventually get rid of our wandering thoughts, get rid of all attachments, so that this Buddha nature can manifest purely. This we can also think of it as there's the moon in the sky, and the sky is clouded. But nevertheless, the moon is still there. But we don't see the moon because the clouds are so heavy. So we don't even see in which direction we should look for the moon because the clouds are so heavy. And so then there's only one way. We try to find a way to let the clouds pass by. And the other thing is we need to trust that the moon is there. And at first we don't see it. So there's a certain degree of faith involved in the Buddha's teaching, in the Buddha, and also in teachers who are enlightened, who have realized this true nature and have gone the way before us and have already made this experience and can certify it for us. So here, coming back to the text, the original Chinese version, the dust and the guests. There's in the Surangama Sutra, there it is described how we can practice or what our mistake is in our life, why we don't see our nature. And there's the example of a guest house, and the guest house has an owner and it has guests, and the guests, they come and maybe just use the bathroom and stay for a few minutes. Or they come and have a coffee and stay for maybe half an hour or an hour, or maybe a guest comes and stays for a meal, and or some guests stay for one night, others stay for a few nights, and there may be even some long-term guests who stay in that room for maybe a few weeks or even a few months. But the characteristic of guests is that they leave eventually. They don't stay there forever. They come and go. And so they are not permanent. They come and go and stay for a while, and then they are gone and new guests come. And there's one in that guest house who is staying there permanently, and that is the owner, the house, the owner of the house. So he is clear about the guests, and when the guests are leaving, he doesn't go out with the guests. He is clear, oh, this one is only having a coffee, and the other one is having something else, is having a meal or staying overnight. And he knows everything about the guests, but he's not touched by the guests. And when if they are happy or unhappy, or they behave well or not, eventually they will be gone. Maybe some are polite, some are not so polite. Maybe some will give a tip, others don't. And he knows it all. He knows, but he knows they are only the guests and they will be gone. So this is an example for just to illustrate the guests. They are there for, they describe all phenomena or in us that are happening in us, like our emotions. They are coming and going, our thoughts coming and going, our concepts are coming and going, just like guests. And some, they may last for a while. Some may last only for a few seconds. We may be scared when we hear a sound, and then when we realize, oh, it was only something trivial, the feeling of scared goes away immediately. Some things may last longer, and there's some thoughts, some emotions, and so on. They last longer, and even concepts that we have about our life, about our understanding, they may last longer. But eventually thoughts come and go, or we feel hungry, then we go and get something to eat, and then that feeling of hungry, the thought is gone. So thoughts are coming and going all the time, and they are just like guests. But there's someone like who is not leaving, and that is the housekeeper, the owner. And the owner represents our true mind. Here we have to be careful not to think that the owner is someone. Yeah, this is just an analogy. There is not a self. The true mind is not to be confused with a self. In all, also we learn true mind is by nature empty. And although we call it true mind, it's not defined to this body or this feeling of me. That has nothing to do with the me. But still there is something, there is not nothing. There is the knowing. The knowing, there is something that comes and goes. The knowing, there are thoughts that come and go. Feelings come and go. And so the clarity, this function of clarity is our true mind. and that stays with us at every moment. And so when we, and the next analogy is the analogy of a room. When we imagine there's a room and the curtains are drawn, and outside there was a heavy rain, maybe a thunderstorm, and then the sun comes out and the light is the air is very clear and the light is bright. And so outside it's very bright, and there's a dark room and the curtains are drawn, but there's a little bit of a gap between the curtains, and there's a ray of light coming in. I'm sure you can imagine this picture, this ray of light and coming in. And when you see in the dark room, you look at this ray of light, you see little specks of dust floating in the air. So they go up and down, left and right, and it's like sparkling, all these specks of dust in the air. And so that is another analogy, that these dusts are our sense impressions or our very refined thoughts, and they move all the time. They're restless, always coming and going of thoughts, up and down, left and right. We are torn by the thoughts. There's sounds, there's sights, there's all kinds of sense reactions to all the six senses, and there's very fine thoughts, and so these thoughts, they are like specks of dust, thoughts or reactions of the mind. But there's something in that room that is not moving, and that is the room, the space. So we have here the analogy of the dust and the space. So the space is not influenced by the specks of dust floating in that room. The space is unmoving, the space is vast, the space is limitless, the space is empty. So that space again is an analogy for our true nature. That true nature is empty, that true nature is limitless and cannot be grasped. And so in this sentence here, what we usually do is we focus on the guests and we focus on the dust. So when we look at our life all the time, from the moment we get up in the morning, we focus on the dust and the guests. So we focus on our thoughts, our feelings, our sense impressions, and in that matter, our mind is obscured. We don't see our true nature. But if we can, if we can shift the focus. So the practice is always about shifting the focus from seeing, instead of seeing the dust, we want to see the space. We want to focus on the space. Instead of focusing on the guests, we want to focus on the host. So this is a shift of focus, and that shows us how to practice this way, how to practice entering through principle. It's just a shift of focus from distraction to awareness. And awareness here is awareness. There's, on the one hand, there's nature of emptiness, and on the other hand, there's nature of awareness, and that is clarity. So here this analogy from the diamonds, from the Surangama Sutra is, in this translation, it doesn't really come out clearly. Then it continues, if one can relinquish the false and turn to the true. So, and that's exactly the same thing. just repeat it in other words. If we can learn to not focus on the dust or the guests, but we focus on the space and on the host, then we return to the true. We go inwards. We don't, inwards here is not only from the five senses outside, but also the sixth sense, our thoughts, which, so when we say inwards, is also an expedient means of expressing, because we have to try to describe the practice somehow, what to do. So what to do is not putting the focus on thoughts and not on concepts and not on sense impressions, but to turn inwards to our nature of awareness, to our nature of clarity, to the knowing of hearing the talk right now. Only this knowing, without discrimination, without judging, without labeling, and just the pure knowing without adding any single thought. And that is returning to the truth, going, relinquishing the false, which is our true, the false is our deluded thinking mind. And normally we trust our mind so much. We trust our logic, we trust our concept, we trust our judgments, and all that is worldly. That thinking mind is the worldly mind. And here we want to go back from the return from the thinking mind to the true mind. And that is we do that by turning inwards. And then the next is fix the mind in wall meditation. Well, that is also here what it means is to do the practice that I've just described, to go inwards and to stay on our true mind, which we also call right mindfulness, without the thinking mind. Not thinking of any mindfulness, but just be, very naturally be without thoughts. And with this state of mind, we fix means we abide in that state of mind. And wall meditation is here. Now we have this in quotes. That doesn't mean we sit facing the wall, but it means we practice as if we were sitting facing the wall. We are not distracted by any worldly things. We are not distracted by the six senses. We are not distracted by our thoughts, our concepts, and even not by our thoughts about the practice. So that, and we just abide in that nature of awareness, the mind that is listening to the talk right now, without thoughts, without discrimination, without labeling, just the intuitive experience of the listening. And so we, that is the state of mind we try to cultivate. And to fix in wall meditation means to keep up that state of awareness in our, not only in our meditation, but also in our daily life. To keep up that state in whether we are in meditation or we are in activity. And when you get a grip on that practice, then you notice that you can practice this way in activity and in meditation. You just keep up this awareness. You don't get distracted by outside things. You are mindful, you are aware, and you are very clear, and you don't give rise to thoughts. And so then it continues, understand that there are neither self nor others. So here we come to a point that the true mind is beyond duality. The true mind is beyond duality of self and others. So here we see we are not talking about the self or the I. That is only the words may sound a bit similar, but here it's not confined to me. There is no me and others. In the ultimate dimension, there's no duality between light and uh, bright and dark, inside and outside, big or small. All these are concepts in our mind. So we may think the big can contain the small, but we think the small cannot contain the big. And this is how we limit our thinking, because we are caught up in duality of big and small. But in the absolute, there is no duality between big and small. So, and when we realize that, we can see actually in the ultimate reality, there are no limits. Everything is possible. And that's very fascinating. Also, when we think about me and others, normally we think about the concept there's me and there's you. And there's that is two different entities. Here am I and there are you. Or here am I and there's all of you, many. So, but in the ultimate, there's only one awareness, and that awareness is not my and your awareness separate, but it's also not one. So there we go again. We transcend the duality zwischen one and many, zwischen me and others, and also between one and two, or united and separate. All these are concepts of duality. So this ultimate reality, this Buddha nature or nature of awareness, cannot be described in words. It's a direct experience that we can only make through our practice. And here in this chapter, Bodhidharma tries to describe it so we can have a little bit of a feeling what it's like, and also to know when we experience something else, to know, okay, when I put on this standard, I know I'm not there yet. I still have duality inside and outside, me and others. And then we come to the next. There are neither self nor others, that mortals and saints are equal and one. That's another duality. We think I'm unenlightened, I'm a mortal, a worldly person, and on the other hand, there's the enlightened ones, there's the arhats, the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas. And so we make a duality, and we think, oh, I'm only a normal person and enlightenment is so far away, difficult to reach, and I cannot do it. And I look up to the enlightened, the saints that we call the Buddhist saints, and there's a duality. But in the end, we all have the same Buddha nature. The Buddha nature doesn't get diminished because I'm not enlightened, and it doesn't get increased when someone is enlightened. The Buddha nature is always the same, the nature of awareness. It's only because I have wandering thoughts and attachments. It's only because I focus on the guests at the dust. That's why I cannot manifest this full potential that I have in myself. And that is a miracle. But I block myself off from the use of this miracle. And the first step is to realize, to dwell in this peaceful state, in this awareness without duality. And when we cannot do this, at least what we can do is to see that we are caught up in duality. That's the first step, to see, okay, here, there I'm caught, and then to try to let it go again and again, just letting go again and again. And that's how we can practice. Then it continues, abiding this way without wavering, clinging not even to the scriptures. So abiding to this way is abiding in this mind, abiding in this nature of awareness, without wavering, without giving in to my wandering thoughts. When I meditate and I have nothing else to do, I just dwell on this true mind without giving rise to wandering thoughts. And when there's wandering thoughts popping up, I just ignore the thoughts. I don't suppress them, I ignore them because I focus on the awareness and not on I focus on the host and not on the guests. I focus on the space and not on the dust. So when the dust is there, it doesn't diminish the space. So when I sit in meditation, I try to keep my mind so clear and still that there's no thoughts coming up and there's only awareness. There's awareness is part of that. True nature is true emptiness, but apart from emptiness, there's also clarity. So we say there's true emptiness and miraculous function, and that those are two aspects of the same true mind. When I sit in meditation, I focus on this mind that is still without thoughts. And when I get out of meditation, I am still in that state of mind, but I'm doing things, and I'm doing things with that state of mind, with that same awareness. So that means I might have to use my mind, but I'm not using the deluded mind, I'm using the clear mind. And that's a different usage of mind. And so we try to when we see this mind, the practice is maybe you have an experience of this mind for a few seconds. That's a good beginning, because then you know what it feels like. You see it, you have seen it, you know it is there, and then that increases your faith. And then you can, once you have seen it in an enlightenment experience, then you know, let's say the moon is really there. You know the direction of the moon, and you know how to uh, practice to scatter the clouds so you can see the moon all the time. And then the practice is to keep up seeing the moon and not let the moon be disappear by through the clouds again. And that is enlightened, that is practice after enlightenment. So when you practice this way, and then you just dwell on your nature of awareness, and you don't even attach to the scriptures, because the scriptures, the Buddha's teachings in words, or the teachings of our teachers, may it be the ancient masters but also present day teachers, the teachings are the finger pointing to the moon, and the finger is not the moon. So it's very important to see that the scriptures, no matter how wonderful their things are described in the sutras or in the teachers' teachings, it's only a tool. It's a tool for us to understand, to see our true nature. The finger pointing to the moon, the key is to see the moon and not to attach to the finger and analyze the finger and say, oh, this has certain beautiful fingerprints, or this finger is old or young or whatsoever. That's not the point. The function of the finger is to show us the way to the moon. And so then we can, once we see the moon, we don't need to look at the finger anymore. We don't need the finger. So that's why here, once we attach to the finger, our focus is always on the finger, and then we cannot see the moon because we focus too much on the finger. So that's here what is meant by clinging not even to the scriptures. So if you do that, if you practice in that above mentioned way, then one is implicitly in accord with the principle. The principle here again is the principle of mind, the principle of true mind. And it continues, being non-discriminative, still and empty of effort, is to enter the principle. That is just a repetition and a description of what the mind is like. Non-discriminative means not to have a single thought of like or dislike, not to have a single thought of duality. Yeah, normally when we see things, immediately we judge. We in ourselves, that is automatic. We have like and dislike coming up in our mind, and that is discrimination in our mind. So we try to, or when we are in that state of our natural awareness, we just see the things as they are. They are good. We know that there are certain things that are good, that are wholesome. We know there are certain things that are bad, that are not wholesome. But we just know. We don't attach. We don't add labels. We don't add thoughts. We just know. And when we practice this way, we can notice that our wisdom will increase and our inner wisdom will come out. And at some moments in daily life, we just know what is the right thing to do, the right word to say without going through our thinking mind. And that is the state when we can learn to just dwell on our true nature of awareness. The mind is still. We don't have wandering, deluded thoughts. We don't use our thinking mind. Our mind is the direct mind, the clear mind. So here it's still and empty of effort is a Chinese word that is wu wei. Wu wei is here translated as empty of effort. It means to stay in that state of mind, of awareness, and not to make an effort, also not with our thinking mind. So everything just flows easily, and I'm very clear about every move. I'm very clear. I have the wisdom to decide very clearly what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. I know very clearly, but I just flow and do the things as they need to be done. And that is what we call wu wei. Wu wei also means non-action. But non-action here, maybe people misinterpret it and say, oh, it means to just sit on the couch and not do anything. But that's not what is meant here. It means the thinking mind is not in action. And when we need to do things, we of course when we have things to solve with our intellect, we can still use it, but it's a different mode of using our mind. And here we have the two modes: the mode of our thinking mind, of our deluded mind, and the mode of our true mind. And to be empty of effort, or to abide in a wu wei, is to use the mode of our true mind, of our true nature. That is means the effort. All this means to enter the Mahayana way by principle. So that is the first chapter of this text, is where we can understand this directly. And for example, talking about true mind, and you know directly what is meant, you can experience it right away. Then you can use that true mind, and that is the entrance through principle. And if you still feel it's a bit vague and you don't know, and you start to think about it and analyze it, then you are not there yet. But no worries, you are not there, but there's other ways how we can prepare ourselves, so eventually we can understand this true principle. That is the first part of this text, and now there's still a few moments for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Shifu Simplicity. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask your questions, and I'll read them out for her to answer. So I see a few questions online. Buddha Ruchi, Michael says, I have often thought that main Mahayana practice, they both point us toward enlightenment. This is a beautiful thing. What troubles oft express the idea that the other is not really Buddhist teaching. What do you think of this? How would you describe the difference between these two major schools?
Well, of course, the Buddha, I want to say the Buddha was a wonderful teacher, the supreme teacher, and the Buddha as when you imagine a music teacher. Maybe you have learned a musical instrument, and a music teacher has many different students, and students have different priorities for their pieces of music. They have different capacities, they have different talents, and so the great teacher can give a teaching individually to each of their students so that the students find joy in the practice and they make progress. So in the Buddha's teaching, you find a big variety. We say 84,000 Dharma doors. That means countless Dharma doors or methods that the Buddha gave to many, many different beings for them to improve their current state of situation. So I see it when it comes to Mahayana and Theravada, I see it a little bit like that. There's different priorities and people have different affinities to different teaching styles and also different content, and the Buddha offers them both. And it's only now that we here have in the West, we have so many different traditions coming from different countries that maybe we are more in touch with the varieties. But in the end, it's all teachings of the Buddha.
Thank you, Shifu. And Ayasoma here at Empty Cloud Monastery has a question. She asks, would focusing on the host mean practicing silent illumination?
Yeah, kind of. Yes, you can. There's different ways. In our monastery, we have the method that is called middle way reality method that is similar to silent illumination. And there's in different Buddhist traditions, they have this practice focusing on the host also I think I'm not so familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, but they have it there too. They call it, I think, Mahamudra. And in Japanese Zen, they have it too.
And Shifu, I have a question. As you were describing Buddha, very similar to both the concepts of emptiness and also the concept of nirvana dhatu. So what's the difference between Buddha nature, emptiness, and nirvana dhatu? Is there a difference?
Well, Buddha nature, there is part of Buddha nature is emptiness. But we say so Buddha nature is more than emptiness. Emptiness is one aspect, and the other aspect is that there is still clarity of mind and miraculous function. So the mind that can bring forth all wholesome thoughts. So there is that is not only emptiness that in a way that everything disappears, but the mind is still clear and there's the clarity. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's enough for understanding.
And how about nirvana dhatu? How does that relate to the concept of Buddha nature?
In Mahayana, we say nirvana is we say bodhi nirvana. We say it together. And Bodhi is the aspect of awareness and clarity, and Nirvana is the aspect of stillness and not moving. The aspect of the mind is still and not moving, and Bodhi is the aspect of clarity of mind, and you can say knowing, everything.
Okay, thank you. And Gita Jnana asks, Shifu, we must develop awareness and mindfulness as thoughts arise and pass away while seeing true emptiness. I think that's a question.
Yeah. Well, when you cultivate awareness, then again, awareness is one quality of the true mind, and emptiness is another quality of the same mind. So when you see thoughts arising, you develop awareness, so you focus on the awareness that you know there's thoughts, and you don't focus on the thoughts themselves, but you focus on the awareness. And when you, and the same time, you, of course, you see the thoughts are empty. So there's those, again, there's those two aspects of emptiness and awareness.
Okay, and next, Kumu says, at the deep level, there is Buddha nature connecting all as one. At superficial levels, we act according to our own karma and based on how we act when subjected to other laws of nature. Is that correct?
It's, well, how to say, when we say oneness, we must be careful, because when we say oneness, we also sometimes slip into a duality between one and many. And so at the absolute level, there, of course, you can say it's oneness, but it's a oneness beyond duality. So there's not one opposed to many or two. So sometimes people say, oh, in the end, everything is one, and we are all one. And that's not the correct way. It's not like we are melting into a oneness. But you can also use the word oneness to say, to stress that the Buddha nature is not individual. And what you said, yeah, and when you are with the deluded mind, we are subject to our, because we are attached to our ego, we are attached to our person. So there we, with this attachment, we go through the cycle of birth and death, and we are subject to causality and karma because we are attached to the ego and the self. But the term oneness is, well, it could be a helpful way to understand, but again, not to get caught up in that term.
Thank you, Shifu. And I have another question. So does Buddha nature also have the characteristic of impermanence? Or would you say that Buddha nature has permanence?
Buddha nature has permanence.
Does that also mean
So
that does that also mean that it's unconditioned?
Yes.
So again, this is why to me, it sounds very similar to Nibbana Dhatu, because we would say that Nibbana Dhatu also does not have the characteristic of impermanence or of conditionality. So again, I'm trying to understand, is there actually a difference between Buddha nature and Nibbana Dhatu, or are they talking about the same thing?
I don't know enough about the interpretation of Nirvana Dhatu in your tradition, so I don't dare to answer this.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Do you have another question, Aya?
No, thank you.
Okay. And Desi asks, what are your thoughts on dual ordination, allowing monks to ordain in both traditions and hence wear both styles of robes?
Mm-hmm.
I assume they're asking if someone can be ordained in both Theravada and Mahayana.
No, you can only wear one robe at a time. I mean, yes, I mean, I think it's more for practical reasons, you know. Of course, when you feel you, for example, you start in Theravada and you want to take a Mahayana ordination, I think for me personally that's fine, but it's more about the your mindset. You know, it's not about the robes. And so basically the main thing is to ordain, to become a bhikshu or bhikshuni is already very great. And if you want to take the bodhisattva vows, then of course then it's also great. But for me, I don't see the necessity to say, oh, I ordain here and at the same time, or I ordain also there. You know, you just follow your natural path of what is your calling of the teaching, I would say. Can you still hear me?
Okay.
I see another question that I would like to answer. Someone says, can you have access to Buddha nature and lose it? And that is a clear yes. And that is actually part of the practice. That when you practice, you may have a glimpse of your Buddha nature, and to have a small glimpse. And even if you see the moon and it's still a bit hazy, but you still there's a moon, and that kind of experience you can have easily, but that is not yet the great breakthrough. So, but that helps you, and then the clouds close again because your vexations are still there. You still have your wandering thoughts, you still have your greed, anger, ignorance, but you already saw, yes, there is Buddha nature. And then you continue the practice and try to create the conditions that this experience can come back. And once you realize it again, you can see how you can keep it up. So eventually that you have a deeper and deeper understanding of this experience of Buddha nature, and it doesn't go away. And when you, at a certain level, you, with this understanding of Buddha nature or your experience, you go deeper and deeper on the path, and then you overcome birth and death and still keep up your Buddha nature all the way to Buddhahood.
Okay, thank you. And Amaranta asks, how can we unite not self and emptiness? They are linked in the suttas. The emptiness is linked to not self. I'm confused.
Well, that is part of the same teaching. The non-self is the non-self in a way is another expression of emptiness. That is that we are not real, that we are made up of the 5 skandhas. Our body is the form skandha and the four mental skandhas, and we contemplate on that and see that there's nothing there that we can call a self. And when we contemplate and we see there's no self, then we arrive at emptiness. Maybe for that question you can ask Bante, because that's a very important basic teaching of the Buddha.
Okay, thank you, Shifu. And that's the last question online. Are there any other questions from the residents here at Empty Cloud Monastery? No? So it looks like that's it for this morning. So thank you very much, Shifu Simplicity, for your wonderful teachings. And thank you to everyone who joined in. So please continue joining in. So every Wednesday at this time, we'll have the series with Shifu. And also please join in for our other regular Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning and evening classes. So we'll end the broadcast with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next.
Sadhu.